Imagine you're sitting down for a really high-stakes professional interview. You've spent years building your expertise.
Right.
But instead of feeling ready to discuss all that hard-earned experience, your palms are sweating. Your heart is just racing. And it's not because you don't know your field.
No, of course not.
It's because you feel like you're about to take this incredibly strict, unforgiving language exam.
Oh, absolutely. It's a huge issue.
Right. Like every time the interviewer asks a question, you're not even thinking about your professional judgment. You're just frantically searching your brain for the most complex, impressive sounding English vocabulary words you can possibly find.
You're trying to sound smart instead of being an expert.
Exactly. So today, in this deep dive, we are pulling from two really specific blueprints. We've got excerpts from Auditing Excellence, the Senior Compliance Interview Blueprint, and this pretty grueling Senior Internal Audit and Compliance Interview Simulation.
Yeah, that simulation is no joke.
It really isn't. And our mission today is to provide you, the listener, with a step-by-step coaching session. We want to prove why stressing over complex vocabulary is exactly what will actually cost you the job.
It really is a completely paralyzing mental state, and it derails otherwise brilliant professionals every single day.
I can imagine. Especially for non-native English speakers.
Oh, 100%. When a candidate steps into that room, especially a non-native speaker, the cognitive load is just immense. They stop focusing on their technical expertise entirely.
Because they're obsessing over grammar.
Yes. They're trying to construct these academic, poetic sentences to prove they belong in a senior role. But look, the interviewers on the other side of the table are rarely judging your English fluency the way you think they are.
Wait, really? Because it always feels like a test.
It feels like one, sure, but they are evaluating something else entirely. They're looking at your ability to assess risk and communicate it clearly under pressure.
Okay, so let's unpack this mental trap. Because before we even get into the exact words you should use, we have to completely rebuild how you approach this interview mentally.
Right. The mindset shift is everything.
Yeah, and I was thinking about this dynamic earlier, and it reminds me of a pilot. Like imagine a pilot flying a commercial airliner through a massive, terrifying storm.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right, and they're trying to communicate with air traffic control. If you're that pilot, you don't key the radio and say, behold, the tempestuous skies are wreaking havoc upon our fuselage, and we are experiencing a precarious descent.
I mean, they probably think you were crazy.
Exactly. No, you say altitude 10,000, heading north, heavy turbulence. You use simple, highly structured facts to convey safety, status, and risk.
That pilot analogy hits the nail on the head. It really highlights the core misconception here. We tend to think that senior means academic.
Right. The bigger the words, the more senior you are.
Which is totally wrong. Actually, in high-stakes environments, complexity just creates confusion. And in the world of auditing and compliance, risk is your storm.
So you need to be the calm pilot.
Exactly. The core philosophy from our blueprint source is that this interview is not a test of perfect English. It's a test of clarity of thinking, structured answers, professional judgment, and risk awareness.
So if you're trying to sound like a university textbook, you're actually doing it wrong.
You are actively hiding your practical senior-level expertise when you do that.
Okay, so if you're walking into this interview, your new internal mantra basically needs to be, you are not performing English, you are explaining professional decisions.
I love that. Yes, that is the exact mindset shift. The rule you need to internalize right now is that clarity equals senior-level authority.
Clarity equals authority. Got it.
You really must prioritize short sentences. You need to speak slowly. You need to rely on strong, unbreakable logic rather than complex vocabulary. Because when you strip away the flowery language, what remains is your raw professional judgment.
Okay, but let me push back on this for a second. The pilot analogy only works if the pilot is using the universal language of air traffic control, right?
Right.
If you just use generic basic English, you might actually sound like a total novice. Like you have to use the industry's simple English.
Yes, that's a very important distinction.
Let's look at the specific translations our source provides. Because having the right mindset is step one, but we really need to know exactly which simple words matter most.
Yeah, the source provides this dedicated list of essential audit vocabulary that candidates need to know, and more importantly, they need to repeat it.
Okay, give me some examples.
So these are direct translations from what you might do in practice to the precise industry term you should use in an interview. For instance, if you're talking about reviewing a process step by step with a team, you don't say that.
What do you say?
The industry term you want to use is process walkthrough.
Okay, process walkthrough. And if I'm talking about an internal control, do I just say control?
Yes, exactly. Control. Risk exposure is simply risk. An audit finding is a finding.
That does sound a lot simpler.
Continuing that translation supporting documentation becomes evidence. An improvement suggestion is a recommendation.
Oh, I like that. Recommendation sounds much stronger.
It does. A corrective plan is an action plan. Regulatory alignment is compliance. And a business contact, or someone you're auditing, is a stakeholder.
Okay, stakeholder, got it.
Furthermore, the source highlights specific compliance expressions you should just memorize. Things like not compliant with requirements, in breach of regulations, control deficiency, and compliance risk.
Okay, but again, looking at this list, words like risk, control, finding, if I only rely on these basic terms, won't I sound a little, I don't know, too junior?
That's the fear, isn't it?
Yeah. Shouldn't a senior auditor use bigger, more impressive words to prove they have years of specialized experience? It just feels almost too simple.
It's a trap so many people fall into, assuming that simple means junior. The reality is the exact opposite. Yes. Repeating these specific keywords, risk, control, evidence, that is exactly what demonstrates senior authority. Think about the psychological impact of these words.
Okay, like how?
Well, notice how changing improvement suggestion to recommendation shifts the entire power dynamic. A suggestion sounds like a helpful tip from a subordinate.
Like you're just giving advice they can ignore.
Exactly. A recommendation, on the other hand, is a formal, objective directive from an expert. It removes emotion and replaces it with authority.
That makes so much sense. It's the same with control deficiency, right?
Yes, perfectly said.
Because instead of saying the marketing team didn't do a very good job following the rules we set up, which sounds super accusatory or personal, you just say, we identified a control deficiency.
Precisely. It blames the process, not the person. Junior auditors often get lost in the weeds of the technical tasks they performed. They ramble about who they talked to and how hard the work was.
Right, defending their effort instead of the result.
Exactly. Senior auditors keep the focus entirely on the business impact. By consistently anchoring your answers to risk, control deficiency, and evidence, you're signaling to the interviewer that you see the big picture.
You're speaking the universal language of business protection.
Yes, you're speaking their language.
Okay, so we're armed with the right vocabulary. But having the bricks is one thing, building the house is another.
Definitely.
How do we string those words together into compelling, structured answers? Because the moment an interviewer asks an open-ended question, the temptation to just start rambling is huge.
Oh, the rambling is the enemy. To prevent that, the source provides a golden framework for explaining your audit experience. It's a strict four-step process.
Okay, what are the 4 steps?
I did, I analyzed, I found, I recommended.
Wow. I did. I analyzed, I found, I recommended. It's almost musical.
It is, right. It forces a narrative arc.
It does.
Yeah.
And it prevents you from just listing, like, a diary of your daily tasks.
Exactly. You show the entire life cycle of the value you bring to the company. For example, regarding those process walkthroughs we talked about, you don't just say, I talk to people about what they do and look at their spreadsheets.
Which is what everyone actually says in an interview.
Right. But following the framework, you'd say, I conduct process walkthroughs to understand the end-to-end process. I analyze the workflow. I identify risks and control points and find potential gaps. Then I recommend action plans.
You're constantly driving toward an objective outcome.
Every single time.
But let's look at the I analyzed part when it comes to stakeholder management. Because auditing is inherently confrontational. You're basically going into someone else's department to look for their mistakes.
It's very tricky.
Why do stakeholders get so defensive, and how do we explain our management of them in an interview without sounding like a dictator or, a total pushover?
Stakeholders get defenses because they feel personally judged. A junior auditor might say, I'm good at managing people and calming them down.
Which sounds a bit condescending anyway.
It does. But a senior auditor frames it completely differently. The source advises framing stakeholder management as an objective process. I gather information, clarify processes, and validate evidence.
Validate evidence. There's that word again. It takes the ego completely out of the equation.
Which brings us to the ultimate test of a senior auditor. Interviewers absolutely love to probe this: client disagreements.
But the worst part.
The source details a specific high-stress scenario. Imagine a client expects a clear root cause for a major failure, but the evidence you've gathered just doesn't support a definitive conclusion.
And the client is pushing you to make a judgment call anyway.
Exactly.
Okay, so if you guess, you lose your credibility.
Yeah.
But if you tell a senior manager they were wrong, you ruin the relationship. How do you navigate that in an interview setting?
The key is removing the personal conflict entirely by making the evidence the bad guy.
Making the evidence the bad guy. I like that.
Right. You do not say, I told the manager they were wrong. You explain to the interviewer that your conclusions must be evidence-based and not based on assumptions.
So you hide behind the data, basically.
You rely purely on the evidence and focus the conversation on improving controls. The exact phrase the source recommends using is that you worked to align on the findings.
The line on the findings. That is brilliant. It shows you're highly collaborative, but you absolutely do not compromise your professional integrity.
Exactly. You're tough on the issue, but respectful to the person.
And that is what a hiring manager is looking for. They want to know that when they send you into a hostile department, you aren't going to start a war. But you also aren't going to cave in and hide the risks.
You hit the nail on the head.
Okay, analyzing the theory is great, but theory needs practice to become muscle memory. We're going to put you, the listener, in the hot seat right now. We are transitioning into a live, interactive coaching session.
Yes. We are going to run through part 1 of the mock interview simulation from our sources. I am going to play the interviewer.
Awesome.
I'll ask you 5 specific questions designed to test everything we just discussed.
I'll set up the question, and we'll leave a brief pause. Try to actually formulate your opening sentence out loud. Seriously, whether you're commuting, making dinner, or sitting at your desk, speak your answer. Let's see if your instinct matches the senior framework.
Don't be shy.
Then we'll break down the positive points and the improvement points so you can grade yourself. Ready? Let's dive in.
Okay, here we go. Hello. Thank you for meeting with me today. To start, could you please tell me about yourself and your professional background? Pause for a few seconds so you can answer.
Okay, how did you open? This is the classic icebreaker, but it's a total trap if you just recite your resume.
It really is. The positive point here, according to our source, is using a clear 3-part structure: who you are, your core experience, and your motivation for this specific role.
And the improvement point to check yourself on: did you use short sentences? When people are nervous on the first question, they tend to use massive run-on sentences.
Keep your logic strong and your sentences short. Let the interviewer breathe.
Great advice. Let's move to question 2. I always feel like this is where candidates start rambling about their daily routines. Let's see how you handle it.
Can you explain your experience in internal audit? What steps do you usually take during an audit engagement? Pause for a few seconds so you can answer.
All right. Did you catch yourself listing tasks, or did you use the framework? The positive point is hitting that golden structure. I did. I analyzed, I found, I recommended, showing the full life cycle of an audit.
The improvement point here is vocabulary. Did you remember to use the word evidence when talking about reviewing documentation?
Because saying, I looked at the files, is junior.
Very junior. Saying, I validated the evidence project's senior authority.
Okay, question 3. This dives into process understanding. Let's see if you can keep it high level and business focused.
We value process understanding here. How do you conduct a process walkthrough to identify risks? Pause for a few seconds so you can answer.
For this one, did you mention checking the end-to-end process and comparing it to internal policies? That is your positive point.
You have to show you understand how the whole machine works, not just one cog.
Exactly. And for your improvement point, the source wants you to explicitly mention identifying control points where a risk might materialize.
It shows you aren't just observing. You are actively hunting for the exact mechanisms that keep the business safe.
Okay, moving on to question 4. This is about the people side of the job.
During an audit, you must talk to many people. How do you manage your relationship with stakeholders? Pause for a few seconds so you can answer.
Did you fall into the trap of saying you're just really friendly? The positive point here is explaining that stakeholders are essential resources to understand how the process works in reality versus on paper.
But the improvement point that elevates your answer to the senior level is mentioning that you use stakeholders to validate evidence.
That specific phrase proves your interactions are objective and outcome-driven, not just casual chats.
Absolutely.
Last one, question 5, the disagreement scenario. Deep breath.
Sometimes a manager might not like your findings. Tell me about a time you had a disagreement with a client. Pause for a few seconds so you can answer.
That's always a tricky one. The positive point here is emphasizing that your audit conclusions must be evidence-based and never based on assumptions or personal opinions.
And the improvement point to secure the win, did you use the phrase aligned on the findings?
It demonstrates that you view conflict resolution not as winning an argument, but as reaching a professional, risk-focused agreement.
Yeah.
Great job. Seriously, doing that out loud is the fastest way to rewrite your neurological pathways so you don't freeze in the real thing. Now, after breaking down those individual mechanics, let's look at the finished product.
We are going to integrate the full 15-minute simulation script from part 2 of our source. I will continue to play the interviewer, and you will read the candidate's lines.
And, listeners, we're going to pause the tape occasionally to break down the mechanics of the answers in real time so you can hear exactly why this candidate is getting the job. Let's do it.
Welcome. We are looking for a senior auditor for our international team. Let's begin. Tell me about your current work and why you want this position.
I am an internal auditor with experience in consulting. I have worked in risk management, internal controls, and compliance. I want this role because I enjoy international environments with strong governance.
Okay, let me stop the tape right there. Notice what just happened. The candidate didn't give a 10-minute monologue about their childhood passion for spreadsheets.
3 sentences. Who they are, what their core skills are, and their motivation.
It is shockingly brief. And because it's brief, it projects absolute confidence. Let's keep going.
Go for it.
Good. Tell me about your audit process. What do you do when you find a problem?
I analyze business processes and test internal controls. When I find a control deficiency, I identify the risk. Then I provide a recommendation and work with the client on an action plan.
Pausing again. Did you catch the vocabulary? They didn't say, when I find a mistake.
Right, they said, when I find a control deficiency.
They skipped the emotional drama of finding a problem and went straight to the golden framework. Analyze, identify risk, provide a recommendation, build an action plan.
It's just so clean. The interviewer doesn't have to decipher what the candidate means. Let's look at how they handle high-stress situations.
How do you handle a compliance risk that is very high?
I document the evidence clearly. I explain that the process is not compliant with requirements. I focus on the facts and the regulatory alignment to help the company stay safe.
Pausing the tape. Not compliant with requirements and regulatory alignment. These phrases remove the auditor's personal opinion entirely.
The auditor isn't the one punishing the company. The regulations are simply out of alignment.
The auditor is just the messenger of the facts. Okay, next question.
Let's hear it.
How do you ensure your recommendations are implemented?
I follow up on the action plan. I check if the root causes are addressed. This helps improve the control environment over time.
Pausing. Again, the brevity is the secret weapon here. A junior candidate would invent a complex story about chasing down managers and sending passive-aggressive emails.
Definitely. This candidate simply states the systemic process. Check the action plan, verify the root causes, improve the control environment.
It's the language of a strategist, not a task worker. Let's bring it home with the final question.
Ready.
Final question. Why should we hire you for this senior role?
I believe my experience in audit, risk, and governance allows me to contribute effectively. I provide clear logic and professional judgment to support the organization's objectives.
Thank you. We will be in touch. And end scene.
Stepping out of character.
Yeah.
Reading that script, my biggest realization was that I didn't feel the need to fill the air with words. As the candidate, I made my point and stopped talking. I wasn't afraid of the silence.
Which is exactly what proves your expertise. You do not need to over-explain when your logic is sound.
Right. That silence after a short, powerful sentence projects immense confidence.
It really shows you trust your own professional judgment enough that you don't need to bury it in a mountain of rambling justification.
It is incredibly freeing when you realize you don't have to put on a theatrical performance or, pretend to be a walking thesaurus. So let's bring this all together.
The core theme of our deep dive today is that a senior compliance interview is won through simple sentences, a laser focus on evidence, and highly structured logic.
It is not a flawless English performance.
Exactly. If you can master the I did, I analyzed, I found, I recommended structure, and if you can anchor every single answer to key vocabulary like risk, control, and evidence, you will project the calm, objective authority that hiring managers are desperate for.
And I really want to remind you that this step-by-step toolkit isn't just a gimmick for an interview room. These communication techniques will make you a more authoritative auditor in your daily work.
Oh, for sure. In your weekly committee meetings, in your day-to-day client interactions.
When you're that pilot flying through a storm, you want everyone on the radio to trust you instantly. Simple, evidence-based language builds that trust faster than anything else.
It absolutely does. It transforms you from someone who just checks compliance boxes into a trusted strategic advisor to the business.
Which leaves us with a broader question to consider. In corporate culture, there's this massive misconception that using big, complicated words makes you look highly intelligent. But as we've seen today, true mastery is the ability to make the complex simple.
So true.
If clarity equals authority, I want you to ask yourself, where else in your daily professional life are you hiding behind complex academic language when a simple evidence-based sentence would be far more powerful?
That is a phenomenal question to ask yourself before you draft your next email or step into your next big meeting. Strip away the fluff and let your expertise speak for itself.
Until next time, keep it simple, rely on the evidence, and trust your professional judgment.